We have some analysis for you now. CBC News Washington correspondent Alexander Panetta joins us. And Alex, your piece is now up on our website, and it has the headline, Biden's Debate Disaster. You also use the word agonizing. So just how bad was it?
I believe I called it the agony in Atlanta. How bad was it? Look, in the generally friendly pages of the New York Times opinion section, after the debate, there were columns with headlines like, President Biden, it's time to drop out. It cannot go on like this. President Biden is my friend. He must bow out of the race. Biden, he appeared confused for an agonizing 14 seconds in the clip Katie showed us. And it was a catastrophic moment that will enter the cringe-inducing annals, is what I called it, in the history of presidential debates. And I think it's worth drilling down into that moment to sort of understand exactly what was going on here. And President Biden has one of the most successful legislative records of any president in the modern era. And he was trying to refer to one of those successes. It was a bit out of context. They were talking about taxing billionaires, raising money from taxing billionaires to spend on social programs. He kind of awkwardly tried to pivot to a cost-saving measure, which was negotiating with drug companies to drive down the cost of prescription drugs for seniors under the Medicare program. That's what he was trying to do, all right, because it's potentially a winner for him. It's a rare example of costs going down in the last few years. And it was like watching someone try to swim to an island and not make it there. He just couldn't make it. It was 14 seconds where he stumbled around and was incapable of articulating his own successes. And look, he entered this debate slightly behind Trump, badly behind Trump in a few swing states, and that debate didn't help him catch up at all. As a matter of fact, if anything, it's probably going to hurt him. We're seeing some early polls from CNN in the post-debate analysis. Among people who watched that debate, Trump won handily by something like 30 points, according to that first Snap survey. We don't know if that'll hold, but there's no reason to believe it is not an accurate reflection of how the American people might react to this, and it's bad news for the president.
Trump, though, also had his own challenges in this debate. A lot of baggage. What did viewers hear from him, as we heard from Katie? Some misinformation there as well.
Absolutely. It was textbook Donald Trump. Donald Trump hasn't changed over the last 10 years, or arguably Biden has. He lied, he exaggerated. Biden's cognitive clunkers distracted from what ordinarily would have been the big story this morning, which is Trump's own deficiencies. He talked about the best economy in history under his presidency. It clearly wasn't. Now, by no objective metric was it the best economy in history in terms of either GDP growth or labor force participation or anything else. He talked about having the best environmental record in history. But more importantly, he refused to say, I will accept the results of the election this time, right? And this is something that Katie just told us about a moment ago. But I'm just trying to think back to January 6th, almost 4 years ago. And this was the first opportunity for someone to confront him, because they weren't going to do it on the Republican debate stage. Republicans weren't going to do this, and Trump didn't participate in those debates anyway. But this was the first opportunity for an American citizen to stare Trump in the face in front of a large audience and say, how dare you? How dare you squander a legacy of 2.5 centuries inherited from our democratic forefathers and ancestors and threatening the peaceful transfer of power. You're unfit for office. Biden couldn't do that. This most basic democratic function of standing up for election integrity against someone who threatens it. The president showed himself incapable of the challenge. So whatever Trump's deficiencies were, they're not the story after this debate. No one's going to be paying attention to them.
The big question now, then, is can Joe Biden recover from this? His next big stage, the Democratic convention in August. If he can't recover, what does the party do?
Well, the question is what happens before that convention, because once that convention happens, he'll be cemented as the Democratic nominee. And he will enter the general election season. The only question now is whether anyone has a conversation with the president and says, look, anyone close to him, and tries to convince him not to run, because it's the only way you could potentially replace him on the ticket, or at least do so relatively easily. If he withdrew, you could have an old-style brokered convention, and it would be presumably Vice President Kamala Harris against other challengers, perhaps one of the Democratic governors in some of the northern states where they've got a pretty strong bench. But if President Biden doesn't drop out, he's their candidate, and right now you'd have to say he's the underdog. And I'm just thinking back to how one of his predecessors as president, Ronald Reagan, dealt with a similar set of circumstances in 1984. People were concerned that Reagan was too old. They were concerned that his mental acuities were weakening. And, you know, in the first debate against Walter Mondale in 1984, he didn't look very good, and people were worried about him on his own side. But in that second debate, he put those concerns to rest. And when the topic of age came up, you know, he made a joke about not wanting to make age an issue in this campaign because he didn't want to insult his opponent's youthfulness and inexperience. Everyone laughed, but that was seen as a fatal shot against Mondale, being able to turn the age question around, have some fun with it, and show himself capable of parrying in a live setting. Biden couldn't do that, and we'll see if it's too late. But certainly right now, today, a lot of Democrats and a lot of people around the world hoping to prevent another Donald Trump presidency are going to be nervous.
And there's only a few months to go before Election Day. Alex, thanks for this.